Usually when we talk about dealing with a crisis, especially a physical one, like a medical diagnosis, there is this intense, almost desperate expectation of precision.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like engineering, right? You fall, you break your arm, you go to the hospital, and the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the black background.
Right, the evidence is right there.
Exactly. The doctor just points to it with a pen and says, well, there it is. There's the break. And immediately there's a protocol. 6 weeks in a cast, physical therapy, and you're healed.
Yeah, it's binary. And because it's binary, it's deeply comforting to us. I mean, we have this innate human desire for our pain to be, visible, to be categorized, and most importantly, to be quantifiable. If we can see the fracture, well, we understand the mechanics of how to fix it.
But then, you step out of the hospital and into the world of human emotion. You step into the messy, sprawling reality of dealing with hard things.
Like the loss of a spouse?
Yeah, or navigating these decades-old friendships that are suddenly fraying at the edges, and suddenly that emotional x-ray machine is just completely shattered.
There's no jagged white line to point to anymore.
Right. Have you ever noticed how much exhausting, invisible effort goes into making our emotional lives look effortless?
Oh, constantly.
We curate our struggles for an audience, whether that audience is the internet or just, our closest friends. We put up these load-bearing walls of okayness.
Yeah, okayness. I like that.
But if you take that carefully curated performance and you trap it in a house with the very people who have known you long enough to see right through the drywall, what happens?
Well, you get a structural collapse.
Yeah.
You create an environment where the curated image, that polished facade you've been relying on to survive, it simply cannot withstand the gravitational pull of shared history.
And watching that structural collapse happen is exactly what we are doing today. In our deep dive into Autumn Wells' novel, The Reunion Weekend, we get a front row seat to what happens when the emotional x-ray machine shatters.
It's such a fascinating setup.
It really is. And if you look at the cover art provided in our sources, it sets up a very specific expectation. It's this beautifully rendered visual, like a solitary woman seen from behind, her hair catching the breeze as she looks out over this golden, perfect sunset on the sea.
It looks so serene.
So serene. Resting on a rough stone wall beside her is a glass of red wine and a small, flickering candle. It is the absolute picture-perfect image of a relaxing, nostalgic coastal retreat.
Which completely sells the fantasy of the escape, right?
Totally.
When you look at that cover, you see the kind of getaway you book when you want to leave all your modern complications, your grief, your messy relationships back in the city. It promises resolution through aesthetics.
But that aesthetic is a total lie.
A huge misdirection.
Yeah, or at least a heavy misdirection. So our mission today is to tear down that peaceful golden hour image and examine the incredibly messy, stormy reality of what actually takes place inside that coastal house.
Which is a lot.
A whole lot.
Yeah.
We're going to trace how this specific weekend acts as a brutal but necessary catalyst for emotional breakthroughs. We are going to dissect the tangled, painfully calcified histories of the 4 women who attend. And maybe most fascinating of all, we're going to explore the evolution of our protagonist's grief by looking at her shifting relationship with physical objects.
Because sometimes the hardest things to let go of aren't memories.
Right, they're coats and rings. So okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. Well, to understand why those objects become so heavy, we really have to understand the architecture of the woman holding them. Emily Parker, yes. Our protagonist is basically a master class in the modern performance of coping. She's a widow. Her husband David passed away 18 months prior to the weekend, but she hasn't just been grieving in the quiet privacy of her home. In those 18 months, she has built this massive online following.
Like 60,000 readers, right?
Exactly. She runs a blog with 60,000 dedicated readers who tune in every single week to watch her perform what we might call graceful grief.
Graceful grief. That phrase perfectly captures the absolute absurdity of internet culture right now.
It really does.
We demand that people share their trauma, but we demand that they make it palatable.
Yeah, aesthetic pain.
Right. The sources give us this incredibly poignant scene of Emily sitting at her laptop. She's staring at a blinking cursor, trying to grind out her weekly Thursday post.
And she types that one sentence.
Yeah. She types, "Grief has taught me that healing isn't linear, it's a spiral." Which sounds so profound, right?
Very poetic.
It sounds like something you'd see overlaid on a picture of a misty forest on Instagram. But then she just hits backspace and deletes the whole thing.
She deletes it because she realizes she already used the spiral metaphor in March. Yeah, and she used a slightly dressed up, repackaged version of it in June. She is completely stuck. And the mechanism behind why she is stuck is vital here.
Oh, so?
Well, Emily isn't just suffering from writer's block. She is experiencing profound cognitive dissonance. The internet rewards a very specific arc of healing, you know?
Right, like one that has setbacks, sure, but ultimately trends upwards toward enlightenment.
Precisely. Emily is using her blog as a psychological shield. If she can produce 600 beautiful, insightful words every Thursday before lunch, she can convince her audience that she's managing.
Right.
But more insidiously, she uses it to convince herself that she isn't falling apart.
It's almost like the act of writing the essay has become a substitute for actually processing the emotion.
Exactly. It's a defense mechanism known as intellectualization.
Okay, intellectualization.
Yeah, by turning her grief into content, by analyzing it and formatting it with pull quotes, she strips it of its visceral terror. She is keeping the actual messy, agonizing pain safely at arm's length. It's a highly curated wellness that demands constant maintenance.
I picture it like she's building an Instagram grid out of her sadness.
That's a great analogy.
Right, like every post is filtered, perfectly spaced out, color coordinated with profound little captions about sitting with discomfort. But this grid is entirely two-dimensional. If you were to look behind that grid, you'd see her actual camera roll, which is raw, blurry, out of focus, totally chaotic.
And she is terrified of anyone seeing that camera roll.
Well, but you know who does see it? Her 19-year-old daughter, Lily.
Yes, Lily is the perfect foil for Emily here because teenagers, especially this generation, have a highly tuned radar for performative authenticity.
Oh, absolutely. They've grown up watching adults curate their lives through the internet.
Right.
So Lily's away at university, and she calls Emily just to check in. And during the conversation, Emily reflexively puts on this bright, cheerful, everything is a lesson tone.
And Lily just immediately flags it.
She doesn't let her get away with it at all. She says, "You sound like you're doing the voice. The blog voice."
That phrase, the blog voice, is just devastating because it names the artifice.
Yeah.
Lily is unsparing in that phone call. She tells her mother, people will survive one Thursday without your feelings.
Brutal, but true.
Very. And then Lily points out a crucial distinction that really highlights Emily's avoidance tactic. Lily says that she misses David too, but, and I quote, "I just don't write about it on the internet."
No.
It is a firm rejection of Emily's entire coping mechanism. Lily is demanding that her mother exist in the reality of the loss rather than, the narrative of it.
Which raises a really complicated question about intent, I think.
What do you mean?
Well, when Emily's writing these weekly essays, is she actively deceiving her 60,000 readers? Or is she just a victim of her own delusion?
That's the core question, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, is this blog a lifeline that's keeping her head above water? Or has it become a self-imposed prison where she's trapped playing the character of the inspirational widow?
Psychologically speaking, it's heavily leaning toward a prison.
Yeah, I figured.
The exhaustion of maintaining the gap between your internal reality and your external presentation is immense. Think about the mental bandwidth it takes to constantly monitor your own grief, to see if it's content-worthy.
It must be exhausting.
She actually admits to herself in the text that she isn't really convinced there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh, right.
But she is absolutely certain there's a version of herself who can talk convincingly about the light. She is performing the role of someone who is healing, basically hoping the actual healing will retroactively follow.
Fake it till you make it, but applied to devastating emotional trauma.
Exactly.
And the sheer exhaustion of that performance is exactly what drives her to do something totally reckless. She's rummaging through a drawer and she finds an old physical photograph.
Yeah.
It's of her and her 3 closest friends on a beach 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And what strikes her isn't just the nostalgia, it's how entirely unguarded they look. They look uncareful.
You weren't performing yet.
Exactly. And that night, at midnight, fueled by this desperation to strip off the heavy armor of the blog voice, she impulsively searches for reunion weekend ideas and books. Thornbury Cove, this house on the Sussex coast.
She is trying to engineer a time machine.
Okay.
She wants to retreat to a version of herself that existed before she had to curate her survival. But the fundamental flaw in her plan is that you cannot impose a historical dynamic onto present reality, without friction.
Right. You can't just drag and drop 40-year-old women into their 20-year-old dynamics and expect it to work smoothly.
It never works that way.
Especially not when you add the environmental forcing function of the storm.
Yes, the storm. The storm is the catalyst that makes the weekend impossible to control.
Mm-hmm.
They arrive at this beautiful coastal house, trying to play their assigned roles, and then a massive weather system moves in from the Atlantic. It traps them inside.
Knocks out the power, right?
It does. They are suddenly stripped of their phones, their distractions, and their physical distance. They are forced to sit in a dark room illuminated only by candlelight.
It completely breaches the containment field Emily has built around herself.
Exactly.
Because, you can curate a blog post because you have the safety of a screen and an edit button, but you cannot curate your immediate visceral reactions when you're trapped in a dark room with 3 women who have known you for decades.
They know your baseline.
They know when you're faking it.
Exactly. The removal of the external world forces an internal reckoning. But what makes this narrative so rich is that Emily is far from the only person in that house who is performing.
Oh, definitely not.
The entire premise of their reunion relies on this pervasive cultural myth that old friendships are inherently effortless. That because you share history, you automatically share intimacy.
Yes. The myth that you can just pick up right where you left off. Such a dangerous expectation.
Very dangerous.
As the storm intensifies outside, the social armor that all of these women have been wearing for years begins to fracture. And to understand why those fractures are so explosive, we really need to dig into the architecture of this specific friend group.
We have to look at the roles they've assigned each other.
Yeah, let's look at the core attendees, Claire, Rachel, and Sophie. The way Autumn Wells constructs these characters is just a brilliant study in the calcification of female friendship.
Let's examine Claire first, because her dynamic with Emily is the oldest. It stretches back 36 years.
Wow.
Claire is the absolute embodiment of what we call the useful friend. Her arrival at Thornbury Cove is incredibly telling. She doesn't just show up with a weekend bag. She arrives hauling a massive cool box of contingencies.
Like a prepper.
Yeah, she has packed plasters, sun cream, insect repellent, homemade jam, and a bottle of expensive champagne wrapped carefully in a tea towel so the glass doesn't clink and bother anyone.
She is the group's designated crisis manager. The one who remembers the obscure food allergies, the birthdays, the anniversaries of terrible events.
Right.
But on the surface, it looks like pure maternal warmth. But beneath that extreme usefulness, there is this deep, toxic well of resentment.
Yes.
There's this haunting scene where Rachel wakes up in the middle of the night and overhears Claire on the phone with her husband, Tom.
I remember this.
And Claire is whispering furiously, saying, "I know I'm just the background friend, Tom. You don't have to remind me."
That phrase, the background friend, reveals the transactional nature of her altruism.
Yeah, it does.
Claire's hypervigilant generosity is actually a highly developed defense mechanism.
How does that work psychologically?
Well, by constantly focusing her lens outward, by managing everyone else's joy, organizing the trips, and anticipating their crises, she successfully avoids turning that lens inward.
Oh, I see.
If she is constantly busy being essential to Emily, she doesn't have to look at the gaping emptiness in her own life.
Because if she stops organizing the jam and the champagne, she has to face the fact that she's in a marriage where her husband hasn't truly seen her or valued her in 4 years.
Exactly. She also lacks the high-powered career achievements of the other women, so in her mind, her usefulness is her currency.
Her way to buy affection.
Right. It is the only way she believes she can buy her place in the group. She has convinced herself that if she isn't actively serving them, they won't have any reason to love her.
That's so sad.
But the tragic irony is that by constantly serving them, she prevents them from knowing her as an equal.
And then, sitting across the room from Claire's homemade jam, you have Rachel.
Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel is Emily's friend from university, and she is the polar opposite of Claire. If Claire uses warmth as a shield, Rachel uses ice.
Yes, she does.
Rachel is an intensely ambitious lawyer. When she gets out of our taxi at the coast, she's wearing this immaculate, expensive linen dress, and her heavy laptop bag is practically glued to her shoulder.
She refuses to put it down in the hallway.
Yeah, the laptop bag is her armor. Rachel was assigned the role of the ambitious one in her early 20s, and she leaned into it heavily because competence is a fantastic way to keep people at a safe emotional distance.
It really is. If everyone respects you, they rarely ask if you're actually okay.
Exactly. But what Rachel is hiding beneath that linen dress is that she is facing a catastrophic professional scandal back in London.
A massive one.
She is in the middle of a severe disciplinary process that threatens to dismantle her entire identity.
Her career is collapsing.
Yeah, but she would rather carry the literal weight of her laptop around a coastal retreat than let anyone see her sweat. She is trapped in the expectation of her own success.
Which is a perfect segue into the third friend, Sophie.
Oh, Sophie.
Sophie is a corporate friend Emily made in her 30s. Sophie shows up to the house an hour late, and she is dragging this massive, oversized suitcase. A suitcase that is comedically large for a 4-day weekend getaway.
Right.
And earlier, she had sent Emily this incredibly cryptic text message saying everything is fine and then not sleeping.
The suitcase is a brilliant physical manifestation of denial.
How so?
Sophie packs for a month because, subconsciously, she knows she can't go home. Her life, as she constructed it, is over. She recently discovered that her husband, Mark, has been having an 8-month affair with a coworker named Anna.
And she didn't find out through a dramatic confrontation either.
No. She found out by casually looking at his phone for a photograph. The brutal kicker, which she learns while trapped at Thornbury Cove, is that Mark has already moved Anna into their shared home.
So she brought the massive suitcase because she is effectively homeless, emotionally and physically.
Yeah, and she's sitting in this house drinking wine by candlelight, pretending she just overpacked.
Think about the combined pressure in that living room.
It's immense.
You have Emily performing her graceful grief while suffocating under it. You have Claire simmering with the resentment of the unappreciated servant. You have Rachel projecting invincibility while her career burns to the ground. And you have Sophie pretending she has a home to return to.
They are all expending massive amounts of psychological energy just to maintain their facades.
And you cannot maintain that level of tension when the physical environment strips away your coping mechanisms.
Right. The storm outside mirrors the storm inside, and it all finally detonates in this incredible, ugly climax between Rachel and Claire.
Oh, that fight.
Rachel, whose nerves are entirely shot from hiding her scandal, starts snapping at everyone. And she targets Claire.
Of course she does.
She accuses Claire of making everyone else's tragedies and achievements about herself. She says this devastating line. She accuses Claire of collecting other people's gratitude like stamps.
It is a surgically precise insult.
So mean.
But it strikes at the absolute core of Claire's constructed identity. Rachel is calling out the transactional nature of Claire's love.
Right.
She is saying, you don't do this for us, you do this so we owe you. And being seen that clearly, being stripped of her benevolent disguise, well, it forces Claire to explode.
She finally drops the useful friend persona. And it's not pretty. Here's where it gets really interesting. She screams at Rachel, admitting her own deep desperation. She says that she cries at Rachel's professional achievements because she doesn't have a single achievement of her own left to cry about.
It is this raw, agonizing unearthing of resentment that has been calcifying in the dark for decades.
Exactly.
This brings us to a really fascinating sociological concept regarding long-term relationships. How often do friend groups assign people archetypal roles when they're young? You know, the mom friend, the messy one, the ambitious one.
All the time.
And then they ruthlessly enforce those roles for the rest of their lives.
I want you, listening right now, to think about your own group chats. Think about the oldest friends you have. Who is the designated organizer? Who is the one you all secretly expect to mess up?
Right.
Have you ever stopped to ask if they actually want to be playing that part anymore? Or are they just reading from a script that was written 20 years ago because they're terrified that if they stop playing the part, they'll lose the group?
Rachel explicitly states during this fight that she isn't even sure she is the ambitious one anymore. But it's the easiest role to play because it's what everyone expects. That is the hidden danger of long-term friendships that lack regular, honest recalibration.
Yeah.
You stop interacting with the human being in front of you and you start interacting with the ghost of who they used to be. You are essentially in a relationship with a memory.
But the absolute brilliance of this narrative is that the rupture is the remedy.
Yes.
They don't have this massive relationship-ending fight and then just awkwardly patch it up with polite apologies in the morning. The healing happens because the architecture of the friendship is broken down to the studs.
Because once the truth is out, the artificial roles dissolve.
Exactly.
And they can finally support each other based on reality, not expectation. The dynamic fundamentally shifts. Rachel, who has spent her life being sharp and self-serving, immediately uses her legal expertise to offer to represent Sophie in her divorce pro bono.
And Claire, who has spent her life hiding in the background, suddenly shows teeth. She pushes Rachel to fight her professional scandal instead of quietly resigning.
And Emily finally wakes up and realizes that Claire needs to be supported as a whole, complicated person, not just utilized as a vending machine for contingencies and homemade jam.
The friendships survive the storm precisely because they finally accommodate the ugly truth.
The foundation was strong enough to hold the weight of their actual selves, but they had been too afraid to test it.
Yeah.
However, while these four women have decades of shared context to help them navigate this fallout, there is a wild card in the house.
Oh, yes.
There is an external variable that does not share their history, doesn't know their unspoken rules, and brings a secret so explosive it threatens the foundation of Emily's entire reality.
Yes, we have to talk about the ghost in the group. We have to talk about Grace. Because you think the oldest friends are going to be the source of the main drama, but Grace is the one who completely upends the board.
Grace is the anomaly on the guest list.
She's a university friend or a corporate friend. She's an online friend. Emily and Grace have known each other for 18 months and entirely through the blog.
The genesis of their relationship is crucial to understanding its depth. It started with Grace leaving these incredibly thoughtful, nuanced comments on Emily's posts about David.
Right.
Those comments evolved into private late-night direct messages. Grace became Emily's confidant in a way the Erder friends couldn't be, precisely because Grace had no prior context.
Exactly. Distance was the oxygen that allowed that friendship to burn so brightly. Emily could be utterly vulnerable with Grace because Grace didn't know David, and Grace didn't know Emily before the tragedy. There were no expectations to fail.
But the moment Grace arrives at Thornbury Cove in the flesh, that safe distance collapses and things immediately feel, well, off.
Very off.
The author builds the tension with these masterful, unsettling details. Grace arrives on foot, having dragged her luggage 1.5 miles from the train station in the impending bad weather.
Yeah, she has this strange, intense energy.
And she possesses knowledge that she shouldn't have.
Right. During dinner, right out of nowhere, Grace casually asks Emily if David ever wore a signet ring.
Which is so specific.
And later, she makes an offhand comment about a specific holiday David took in Portugal. These are hyper-specific, intimate details that Emily knows for a fact she has never written about on her public blog.
You can feel the oxygen leaving the room in these scenes. Emily, constrained by her need to be the graceful host, tries to brush it off as a coincidence or a trick of memory.
But the older friends, especially Claire with her hypervigilance and Rachel with her legal mind, are instantly suspicious.
They recognize an interloper.
And it's Claire who finally confronts Grace, demanding to know how she could possibly know about the Portugal trip.
And the revelation, which drops right at the height of the physical storm outside, completely shatters Emily's understanding of her own life.
It's a massive gut punch of a twist.
Grace is the daughter of Eleanor.
And Eleanor was David's first love. They were together when they were 19 years old, decades before Emily ever entered the picture. They fell in love on the Algarve in Portugal.
Grace confesses that she found Emily's blog completely by accident shortly after her own mother, Eleanor, died. And upon reading it, Grace realized the man Emily was mourning was the same man her mother had loved all those years ago. Grace became obsessed with Emily's narrative. She became obsessed with reading about the life her mother didn't get to have.
Now, I want to push back on Grace here.
Yeah.
Because it is so easy to intellectualize this, but I want to look at the reality of what she did. It is a staggering violation of boundaries.
It is, yes.
I picture it like Grace found a keyhole into an alternate timeline of her own life. She sees Emily living the life her mother could have lived, maybe the life where Grace herself had a different father, a different upbringing, and she can't look away.
Right.
But she doesn't just watch, she actively inserts herself into the grieving widow's life under false pretenses. She even brings an unsent letter from her mother to David and a photograph of them at 19. That is emotional vampirism.
It is a severe violation, absolutely. But the psychological mechanism behind it is what makes it a tragedy rather than a horror story. Rachel, analyzing the situation later with that sharp lawyer's mind, observes that Grace's deception wasn't born out of pure malice. Rachel describes it as grief looking for somewhere to live.
Grief looking for somewhere to live, that's a heavy concept.
It is. Grace wasn't just mourning her mother, she was mourning the unwritten ending to her mother's story.
Right.
She was mourning a ghost ship, the life that sailed parallel to her own but was never boarded. By connecting with Emily, Grace was attempting to merge those timelines. She was trying to anchor her mother's unresolved past to Emily's present pain.
But put yourself in Emily's shoes. Imagine the absolute horror, the sheer vertigo of that realization.
It would be dizzying.
You have spent a year pouring your most agonizing, vulnerable thoughts into late-night messages with a woman who is secretly gathering evidence. A woman who is constantly comparing your life to her dead mother's ghost.
Emily's reaction is a profound study in emotional duality. On one hand, she experiences this visceral, sickening betrayal. The safe space she constructed was a panopticon, she was being watched. But on the other hand, and this is what makes Emily such a compelling character, she feels a strange, unwanted, but profound empathy.
For Grace.
Yes. She is looking across the room at a young woman who is fundamentally broken by the loss of the exact same man. They are connected by the geometry of David's life.
But I have to challenge this idea that their bond is salvageable. During the confrontation, Emily shouts at Grace, "How do I know which parts of our friendship were real?"
That's the painful part.
And I think that is the ultimate question of this entire deep dive. Can a relationship built on a massive structural deception still hold genuine love? If the premise of your connection is a lie, does that retroactively invalidate the comfort you gave each other at 2 a.m.?
It's a paradox, and the narrative suggests that multiple conflicting truths have to exist in the same space.
Okay.
Did Grace deceive Emily? Yes, profoundly. But when Grace told Emily she understood the hollow feeling of waking up and forgetting he was dead for 3 seconds, well, that empathy was real. The comfort they offered each other wasn't fabricated, even if the context was hidden. But you are right to highlight the violation, because Grace's presence doesn't just shatter Emily's conceptual understanding of her marriage. Grace specifically targets the physical architecture of Emily's grief.
Which brings us to the most tactile, visceral part of this entire story, the geometry of grief.
Yes.
We need to talk about how Emily's emotional evolution is mapped entirely through her shifting relationship with physical objects. Because 18 months after David's funeral, his ghost is still taking up physical space in her house.
Grief is incredibly territorial. In Emily's house, David's waxed green jacket is still hanging on its designated hook by the back door.
Yeah.
His half-used bottle of cologne is still sitting on the bathroom counter, gathering a fine layer of dust. These are not merely forgotten items, they are active, deliberate participants in her grieving process.
She uses them as emotional tuning forks. There's this heartbreaking admission where Emily says that some mornings she walks into the kitchen and specifically checks that the coat is still on the hook.
Right.
She checks it the way you press on a bruise to make sure it still hurts correctly.
That is a crucial insight into the mechanics of traumatic memory. Emily is using the physical evidence of David to keep the reality of his absence sharp.
But why?
Because the human brain is designed to adapt, to soften the edges of pain over time to ensure survival. Emily is terrified of that softening.
She feels that if the pain fades, David fades.
Exactly. Moving the coat feels like an act of erasure, a betrayal she isn't ready to commit. She is artificially suspending herself in the immediate aftermath of his death by keeping his objects frozen in place.
And this is where Grace's intrusion becomes unforgivable in my eyes. The inciting incident of the novel's climax centers on one specific object. Amidst the chaos of the storm, Grace slips into Emily's bedroom and steals David's signet ring from the nightstand.
To understand the weight of that theft, we have to look at the history of the ring. It is the physical intersection of their two timelines. David gave that heavy gold signet ring to Eleanor when they were 19 because it was far too big for her finger. Eleanor wore it on a gold chain around her neck, resting against her chest for 2 years.
And when the relationship inevitably ended, she returned it to him.
And David took that ring, put it on his own hand, and wore it every single day of his life, including every day of his marriage to Emily. It was on his hand when he died.
So why is the theft of this ring the ultimate violation? Because objects serve as our emotional proxies.
We encode our memories into physical matter.
Yeah, as the narrative so beautifully illustrates, humans don't cry over a piece of waxed cotton. We cry because the coat is empty, yet still holds the shape of the shoulders we loved.
Memories that live only in the mind are episodic. They are subject to decay, doubt, and distortion. But the ring is semantic, tangible proof. It is physical, undeniable evidence that David's hands existed in the real world.
Grace stealing the ring is an act of desperate historical revisionism.
That's a great way to put it.
She admits later that by holding the ring, she could pretend she was holding something that belonged to her mother, not just to David. She was trying to physically repossess her mother's history, but in doing so, she robbed Emily of her most potent anchor.
It forces a crisis, but it is a necessary crisis. By removing the anchor, Grace inadvertently forces Emily to confront the fact that she has been using these objects to keep herself tethered to the past.
Right.
The resolution of this conflict is incredibly poignant because it avoids the cliché of the clean slate.
Exactly. Emily doesn't just gather all of David's things, throw them in a cardboard box, and set them on fire on the beach in some grand cinematic gesture of moving on.
Yeah, that would be fake.
That'd be another blog post. Instead, the spatial mechanics of how she handles the objects change. By the end of the weekend, Emily takes the photograph of David and Eleanor, the one Grace brought, showing them young and in love.
And she doesn't shred it.
She places it with her own wedding photos in her desk drawer.
And she finally approaches the waxed coat by the back door. She takes it off the hook and she carries it into the study, placing it in a wardrobe.
Boy, the study.
We have to analyze the geography of this decision. Moving the coat to the study is not throwing it away. She isn't attempting to erase the past, but she is consciously moving it out of the center of her daily domestic life.
Oh, that makes sense.
She no longer forces herself to encounter the ghost of her husband every time she walks into the kitchen to make tea. She is making physical, geographical space in her home for the present tense.
It's an architectural shift. She also makes a profound decision regarding the signet ring. She decides she is going to pass it on to her daughter, Lily.
But she makes a vow.
Yeah, she vows that she will only give it to Lily with the full story attached. She's going to tell Lily about Eleanor. She refuses to edit the history anymore.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? I was struggling with this at first. Why keep Eleanor's photo with her own wedding pictures? My instinct would be to burn the evidence of the other woman. Why does integrating that photo prove that her grief has evolved?
It's a brilliant psychological breakthrough. A curated grief, the kind Emily was performing online, requires a flawless, one-dimensional subject.
Right.
It requires David to be a saint who only ever existed in relation to Emily. By integrating Eleanor's photo, Emily is finally accepting David as a whole, complex human being who had a vast life before he met her.
He was capable of loving deeply, losing and loving again.
And the realization that breaks her open is this: if David was allowed to have a past, it means Emily is allowed to have a future.
That is the crux of it. The physical shifting of the coat mirrors the internal emotional shift. But we have to acknowledge that Emily could not have made that shift. She could not have dropped the performance without the presence of the final unexpected guest of the weekend.
Yes, we have to talk about James Carter.
James Carter is the antithesis to the chaos of the house. He is a man Emily hasn't seen in over 20 years.
They were incredibly close friends when they were teenagers, hovering on the edge of becoming something more, before university and life pulled them in different directions.
Emily invites him to the coastal house on a reckless, impulsive whim after her mother mentions that James has moved back to the area following a divorce of his own.
And throughout all the madness of the weekend, the stolen rings, the screaming matches about the roast potatoes, the revelations of infidelity and professional collapse, James serves as this incredibly calm, deeply patient observer.
He is the eye of the hurricane.
Exactly. He doesn't insert himself into the drama, but he watches Emily navigate it, and it all culminates in this massive cinematic breakdown on the clifftop.
Following the brutal confrontation with Claire and Grace in the sitting room, the tension reaches its absolute limit. Emily cannot breathe in that house anymore. She runs out the back doors, directly into the driving rain and the wind of the storm, out onto the cliffs overlooking the sea.
And this is the moment the armor shatters completely.
Yes. Emily stands on the clifftop, soaked to the bone, and she finally cries. But she doesn't cry the way she writes about crying.
She isn't shedding a single photogenic tear of quiet acceptance.
These are ugly, loud, heaving, snotty, uncurated tears. James follows her out there, and she just unleashes the truth.
She admits to him the absolute, bone-deep exhaustion of managing her grief for an audience.
And she confesses her deepest terror, that wanting a new life, that wanting him, feels like an unforgivable betrayal of David.
And James's response to this confession is a masterclass in psychological support.
What does he do?
He doesn't do what people usually do when faced with profound grief. He doesn't try to fix it. He doesn't offer hollow platitudes about time healing all wounds.
Right.
He stands in the rain with her, and he tells her that he would rather have 20 minutes of her falling apart properly in all her ugly, messy reality than another year of her managing everything beautifully from a distance.
He just bears witness to her pain. He doesn't ask her to clean it up.
If we look at the thematic structure of the novel, James represents the absolute rejection of the internet's demands.
Oh, interesting.
The blog demands a polished, coherent narrative delivered on a strict weekly schedule. James represents an unhurried, unstructured pace. He explicitly tells her he isn't going anywhere fast.
He gives her permission to be entirely messy without demanding a neat resolution at the end of the conversation.
He embodies the core realization of the story. True healing is not a performance to be perfected for an audience. It is a chaotic process to be survived alongside people who refuse to leave.
I just love the beautiful poetic irony of that. Emily tried to use the reunion weekend to escape into her past, but she actually had to invite a man from her past to help her step into her future.
It's wonderfully done.
It makes me wonder, though, considering the masks we all wear, do we ever really stop performing for the people we love? Or do we just eventually find the people who love our messy rehearsals as much as our final show?
That is a beautiful way to frame it. I think the human ego will always engage in some level of self-preservation. But we learn to drop the most exhausting parts of the performance with the people who prove that they won't abandon the theater when the curtain falls and the stage lights come up.
The epilogue of the book illustrates this new reality perfectly.
Yes, the epilogue is so deeply satisfying because it isn't a fairy tale ending, it's an honest one.
Emily writes one final blog post, but instead of a profound metaphor about spirals, it is a truly honest, messy account of how chaotic the weekend was.
She doesn't tie her grief up with a neat little bow for her 60,000 readers. She effectively logs off.
And we see the ripple effects of the weekend's rupture on the friendships. They are thriving, not because everything is perfect, but because they're finally living in reality.
Claire has taken a job in garden design. She is finally cultivating something for herself, no longer just the background friend waiting to be needed.
Sophie has moved into a new flat, away from the lies of her cheating husband, facing the terrifying reality of starting over.
Rachel is actively fighting her professional case, using her ambition to defend herself instead of hiding behind it.
They stopped playing the roles they were cast in at 20 and started living the lives they actually had at 40. And the final lingering image of the novel is Emily. She is walking out the front door of her house to go somewhere with James. And as she leaves, she deliberately leaves the front door unlocked behind her.
That unlocked door is the ultimate symbol of her transformation.
It really is.
For 18 months, she was hyper-vigilant. She was guarding her life, curating her image, protecting the shrine of her grief from any outside contamination.
Choosing to walk out and leave the door unlocked is a radical embrace of vulnerability.
It is an acceptance that life is inherently messy, people are infinitely complicated, the past cannot be perfectly preserved, and the future is entirely unwritten, and that is exactly how it is supposed to be.
All right, let's zoom out and distill this deep dive for everyone listening. We have explored how a carefully orchestrated Instagram-perfect reunion weekend turned into an environmental breach that forced brutal, necessary truths to the surface.
We unpacked the complex architecture of female friendship, how decades of unspoken resentment and deep love can calcify, and how being the useful friend or the ambitious friend can track you in a prison of your own making.
And we traced a widow's profound, agonizing journey from performing a sanitized, intellectualized version of grief for an audience of strangers, to confronting the ghost of her husband's first love, and finally learning the spatial mechanics of letting go.
Moving a green wax coat and releasing a gold signet ring.
So why should you, the listener, care about Emily, Claire, Rachel, Sophie, and Grace? Because whether you have a blog with 60,000 readers or not, we all curate our lives.
Yes, we do.
We all have a version of the blog voice that we use to avoid being a burden or to make our chaotic lives look a little more organized to the people around us.
We all assign roles to our friends, and we all play the roles assigned to us.
The reunion weekend is a powerful, urgent reminder that the people who actually love us do not want the tidy, curated version of us. They want the real us. Ugly tears, oversized suitcases, and all.
It challenges us to examine the load-bearing walls in our own relationships. Where are you performing? What relationships in your life might actually deepen, might actually survive the storm if you finally allowed yourself to drop the script and admit that you don't have it all together?
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. I want you to look around your physical space. Think about an object in your home right now that belongs to someone you've lost.
Good question.
This doesn't have to be a death. Maybe it's a relationship that ended, a friend who drifted away, a version of yourself you outgrew. Look at that object and ask yourself, is that object acting as an anchor, keeping you safely grounded in who you are? Or is it a weight keeping you standing paralyzed at the edge of your own life?
It has been a fantastic experience exploring the mechanics of this story with you. There is so much beneath the surface when we stop accepting the curated image.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Stay curious, question the roles you're playing, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.